And,
Yeah, feel free to start, Chair.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the North Northamptonshire Joint Planning Committee on 28th of October. Just a few reminders that we are on Zoom, and since it's a virtual meeting, please be patient with the proceedings as a result of that. All the speakers will be introduced by name, both members and officers, prior to them speaking. And the protocol that we'll follow is the officers' report, the members' debate. I will then restate the recommendations to be voted on and seek a seconder and proposer for each recommendation. And at the vote, Anne will be asking each member by name which way they're voting. And I will then state the final decision. And do you want to start with the register of attendees?
Thank you, Chair. If councillors could indicate, say present, when I read your name out, for the benefit of people who may be listening on YouTube. Councillor Mike Tebbert.
Present.
Councillor David Brackenbury.
Present.
Councillor Malcolm Waters. Councillor Waters.
He is here.
Yes, I thought I saw his name. Councillor Stephen North.
Present.
Councillor Andy Mercer.
Present.
Councillor Martin Griffiths.
Present.
Councillor Jan O'Hara.
Present.
Councillor Anthony Dady.
Yeah, I'm here.
Councillor David Jenny.
Present.
Councillor Malcolm Waters.
Try for a second time.
Councillor Malcolm Waters.
Yes, he is there, Anne.
Yeah,
I
thank
can
you.
see Malcolm.
Officers present are myself, Anne Ison, Committee Administrator this evening, David Pope, who is our Committee Manager tonight, Andrew Longley, James Wilson, Simon James, Samuel Humphreys, Natalie Oates, Paul Woods, Rob Harborough and Simon Richardson. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Have we had any apologies?
I've received no apologies, Chair,
Okay.
unless anyone has any to give from the
Does
meeting.
anyone have any apologies?
Yeah, I'm here as well, Councillor Andrew Scarborough.
Excellent. Thank you, Andrew. There's Anthony Dady. He's got his hand up. You can.
Yes, yeah, thank you. I'm going to be leaving around 8 o'clock. So just apologies in advance. I might not be at the end of the meeting, depending on how long it goes on for.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. Anthony. Are there any declarations of interest? None, I don't think. If there is anything crops up, please shout.
Thought I saw a hand, Chair, but the hand
Did you?
disappeared.
Oh, what, one of the electronic hands?
Yeah, it's disappeared.
Okay. Can we just go through the minutes of the 3rd of September, just in case there are any errors or corrections that you wish to make? We'll go through them. Page 1 or page 3 on the bottom of it. Page 2. Page 3. Page 4. Page 5. Page 6 and page 7. Is it your wish that I sign them as a true record? Can you please indicate?
Aye.
Thank you very much indeed. In which case we'll move straight on to item 4 on the agenda, the planning for the future white paper, and this will be introduced by Andrew Longley. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Just a point in terms of the committee's business this evening. The committee is quorate at the moment, but when Councillor Dady needs to leave, I think we'll be short of a Corby member. So I don't want to put the pressure on, but it would be good if we could make a decision on. those key matters. Thank you very much, Chairman. So with that in mind, I'm going to introduce this report very quickly and then hand over to members. The report seeks agreement for the Joint Committee's response to the Planning for the Future White Paper, and that response is set out at Appendix A of the report. This response takes account of the excellent responses that the individual LPAs have now agreed and I think submitted, and also the discussion that members had with members of the Joint Planning Committee and the Shadow Executive on the 15th of October. And I subsequently circulated a copy of an amended response showing how we changed that in the light of comments. The deadline for our response is the evening of the 29th, that's tomorrow evening. So it is really important that the Joint Committee agrees a response tonight and the Shadow Executive agrees a response tomorrow evening. At page 12 of the report, we set out what the government thinks is wrong with the current planning system. It being too complex, discretionary rather than rules-based, takes too long for things, for local plans to be adopted, and the list goes on. But I think the key one is that, in their view, it leads to not enough homes being built. And that's one of our criticisms of the white paper, and it's very much focused on housing delivery. The proposed remedy to this is set out in the white paper in 24 proposals under 3 pillars, and we've summarised that for you at pages 13 to 16 of the report. You will have considered and debated this at length, so I'm not going to take you through that, but the pillars are essentially around planning for development, which deals with simplifying the local planning process, setting mandatory housing requirements, and streamlining the development management process. The second pillar is around planning for beautiful and sustainable places, with a lot of emphasis on local design codes and guidance, stronger national policy and support, and what they're calling a fast track for beauty to speed up the consideration of development proposals. And then the third pillar is around planning for infrastructure and connected places. And the headline proposal there is an infrastructure levy to replace current Section 106 and community infrastructure levy arrangements. And then there's a final section around delivering change, which sets out that the government will put in place a resource and skills strategy for the planning sector to see these proposals implemented. And it also talks about stronger enforcement powers. So at pages 16 to 17 of the report, we summarise the headlines of our response, and this really reflects previous discussions that members have about the planning system not being broken in Northamptonshire and it not being at fault for levels of housing delivery. And then our response goes on to talk about the need for more focus on jobs, infrastructure, and the environment, and ensuring that developers build out consents. So in essence, saying that whilst the proposals in the white paper are largely about deregulation and making things easier for the development side, the flip side of that is that the local planning authorities are doing, in Northamptonshire, doing what they need to do, and we need the certainty around those other elements to bring growth forward. There are some elements of the proposals that we recommend supporting. It's around streamlining local plan process, particularly the emphasis on design, and no members have been strongly in support of that. And clearly the digitisation of planning processes is a big opportunity going forward, and it's something we clearly need to be doing. The discussion at this seminar was also supportive of an infrastructure tariff if it delivers greater certainty and more infrastructure and affordable housing than under current arrangements. And that is a big if, but members were supportive of the proposal in principle. Moving on in the report, we do identify a number of objections and concerns about other aspects of the proposals, and particularly around the lack of detail about how they'd work in practice. I've talked about the emphasis on housing delivery and the lack of substance around other elements such as climate change planning system needs to address. There's worries about the loss of local control and flexibility if we have top-down binding housing requirements, and also if we're no longer able to set out local development management policy, if that all goes into the national policy. We're worried about the abolition of the duty to cooperate and the lack of information about how strategic issues will be addressed going forward. Clearly, the Oxford-Cambridge spatial framework may be part of the answer for this part of the world, but the white paper's silent around that. And then there is worry about the proposals for more permitted development and permission in principle, which is effectively putting the onus on local authorities to sort it all out at the plan making stage, and putting the onus on communities to engage at the plan making stage, because there won't be the same opportunities later in the process. And that's a big issue and a big practical consideration, particularly when these proposals would also have the effect of removing some of the fee income and pre-application charges that the authorities currently rely upon. So the conclusion of the report, Chairman, on page 18, notes the significance of the planning reforms and the importance to the work of when the unitary authority is in place. The shadow executive will be considering this paper tomorrow. It's important to note that the reforms are going to take a number of years to implement, and it remains to be seen which of those proposals the government does take forward in the light of this consultation. But to end on a positive note, the new authority will have an opportunity to run with the elements of the proposals that it supports as it looks for the transformational elements in its new services. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew.
Councillor Brackenbridge.
Councillor Brackenby is first on the list.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and my apologies to members of the East Northamptonshire Planning Policy Committee for rehashing some of our debate from last week. But first things first, I'd like to congratulate you, Andrew, and all your staff for an excellent response to this consultation. I have little to add except in about 3 specific headers. One point which I think hasn't been perhaps emphasized as much as it could have been is the fact that the only local involvement, or the only political involvement, would be at the plan making stage. You have 30 months to produce a plan, and how on earth every local planning authority in the country is going to produce a plan and have it adjudged sound by the planning inspectorate within 30 months is an interesting mystery. And at the development management stage, of course, there would be no democratic involvement at all. There would simply be a determination as to whether this application or that application fulfills the rules set out in the planning policy, but there would be no way of determining a particular application with member involvement. I'm extremely concerned about the considerable extension of permitted development, because in that it would make it very difficult as North Northamptonshire to allocate strategic infrastructure. As I said at our earlier meeting, I don't mean the infrastructure that is connected with a particular development or application, but I mean the strategic infrastructure that makes it all hold together. That, in my view, would be very difficult to arrange, because we would have permitted development opportunities springing up in reasonably random locations. So that is a concern that I have. And the other point in Pillar 2 is, of course, this business about beauty. While it's of course highly desirable that all applications and all development should be beautiful, it is somewhat of a subjective term. It is in the eye of the beholder, and what we should be focusing on is what the local people want, what local needs are, and that would not be the same in Northamptonshire as it is in other parts of the country, where everybody's different. So with that slight broadside, especially involved with democratic accountability being taken out pretty much, with the neighbourhood plans and localism being somewhat sidelined in my view, I do commend the responses to the white paper and will be very interested to see where we come from. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, David.
Councillor North, Chair.
Councillor North.
Thank you, Chairman. And I will certainly follow my East Northants colleague who, and we did debate this. I know some councils have delegated within their systems, Chair, but we did discuss this for over 3 hours, if I recall, from last Monday. So East Northants gave it a really, really good shot. I would very much support this this paper. Normally, of course, we do take a balanced response in relation to government consultations, as one tends to do. But I think with this one and with the changes to the planning system, we have, in this case, quite rightly, given it as it is in our view and how we see things. And I think, not speaking for everybody, but I think there is a shared view that this could be one of the most damaging papers that has come forward from the government in a long time. I very much welcome 4.5 section on page 17. As I said, it's normally a balanced act with good parts and not so good elements of it, but I think that really does cover the real issues that we are facing. And of course, we have all debated this in our sovereign councils and at the workshops. So there isn't a great deal more to add, Mr. Chairman, but very much support previous speakers' colleagues, very much support 4.5. And I think it's this issue around housing delivery as well. I think we all know it's supply and demand market, and setting these undeliverable targets and relinquishing on some of the other areas, I think, as we can all gather, is just not going to work in relation to where the current system is. Yes, there is a shortage of housing, Chairman, but we do need to make our own choices in relation to design, where they go, and obviously make sure that we can actually deliver them to obviously deliver the needs of our communities. And so on top of that, of course, we have got the infrastructure deficit as well. I think one thing that is welcome in this is, obviously, from my point of view, I think I do welcome the levy in relation to that. I think that will be a much better system than the 106 agreements going forward. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Just a quick question was, you're there, have East Northants submitted their response as well? You have, thank you.
Councillor Griffiths, Chair.
Councillor Griffiths.
Thank you, Chairman. And yeah, I'll start by agreeing with the two previous speakers. The quality of this submission is absolutely brilliant. And we in Wellingborough have had 2 sessions and again have submitted a very high quality response to the white paper. Designing and shaping our communities is one of the most important things that we can do. We do at the moment, and we will do as part of Northamptonshire. That's delivering strong homes and quality homes and the infrastructure that goes with them. I had 20 minutes to spare late last week and I drove around the borough, and all our plans, Andrew, over many years are happening. It's there in front of our eyes. We've got the first show homes that are going to be open shortly on the old, what we refer to as Wellingborough North site. The development there. We've got a further reserve matters application coming forward for Stanton Cross next week. I can't say how that will go, but I would hope that it be given serious consideration by the planning committee. And we have got, at long last, the application behind Sainsbury's, between Sainsbury's and the top end of the Queensway estate, which will deliver further homes and as well as that, a large percentage of affordable homes. So I'd just like to, again, end by congratulating the officers on the quality of the report. And as Steve said, we can do this. We don't need some of the legislation that's in this white paper coming to be law. We can do it. We've done it for many years. And I really hope that the government listen to local authorities and listen to areas like Northamptonshire that have had a really good record of delivering and will continue to deliver the houses that everybody needs.
Thank you, Martin. Much appreciated.
Councillor Mercer.
Andy, Councillor Mercer.
Well, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I'm very appreciative of the paper the officers have written, and I would suggest that we support it as rapidly as possible and push it straight through, if only to guarantee that we get finished before Councillor Daly has to disappear. But specifically, I would like to look at it from a strategic point of view. The housing issue is the one that the government sees as its #1 priority, but it is a failure of the market. It's not a failure of the councils or of the regulators. It is a failure of the market. The government is addressing the wrong end of the problem. The problem is that the market is not delivering, and the government should be using either enforcement or incentives to make the market deliver. Trying to fiddle with the planning system is fixing the wrong problem. It's not the bit that's broken. And it's going to end up making the problem worse because you're tampering with the bit that did work. After all, we've got, what is it, getting on for 500,000 extant planning consents that haven't been built out by developers over the last 10 or so years. That means the problem is not our problem. So why are they trying to fix it at our end? So vote this through and get it in there as quick as possible. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Andy.
Councillor Scarborough, Chair.
Councillor Scarborough.
Thank you, Chairman. My comment's very brief. I would endorse everything that colleagues have said about the quality of the document. I'm concerned about, on reading it for the nth time, about our answer to question 18 under proposal 12 on page 28, which is about should we establish a new body to support design, coding and building better places, to which our answer is yes. But if you actually read our answer, it can at best be described as a very, very, very qualified yes, not least because we say support on design issues is important, but it's unclear why this could not be achieved through additional resources for existing bodies such as the Design Council, CABE and the network of architecture centres. So I think we're saying we don't really want to see, actually, a new body to support design. So I wonder whether we can make that a qualified yes or a not sure rather than a yes, we endorse your proposal, government, because I don't think we actually do.
Thank you. We'll get back Andrew to answer that one in a moment. Anyone else wishing to speak at this stage?
Councillor O'Hara, Chair.
Councillor O'Hara. Can you unmute yourself?
I have done it now, sorry. I clicked on something else. Thank you, Chair. It's just a quick question, really. The report is absolutely fantastic, and like everybody said, we need to get it off as quick as possible. But on page 15, when we're looking at point 3.9, it kind of struck me that do we actually need to be more specific? We said it based upon a flat rate. We discussed it last time, and I think Councillor Jenny suggested, you know, a figure that, you know, and that we said that perhaps it should be based on an amount being paid from house one, so you don't get a developer coming along and trying to, you know, get out of it by only building 100 houses, 99 houses because they pay the levy at 100, or build and sell. So I think, is that robust enough to kind of make that point that we are in favour instead of 106 that was renegotiated, that a developer knows the amount is payable from the outset? And that was the only thing I was really concerned about, and obviously making sure that we don't just build little boxes and that they're eco-friendly and fit for purpose. But the report is fantastic, so thank you, Andrew, and all your team. It's amazing.
Thank you, Jan.
Councillor Jenny, Chair.
Councillor Jenny and then Councillor Daly. David.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, that was very nice of Jan to give me the introduction. I wanted to go quite a bit further as far as the documentation regarding the infrastructure levy was concerned. And to that extent, I've picked up on most of these comments in here and drafted a response for Rushden Town Council, and exerted my influence and put a lot of that in there. So I'm not overtly concerned about beefing it up in here tonight, because I know Rob Harbour has got one or two concerns, which I think if the system was made to work properly would soon evaporate. But as it stands at the moment, because the detail of is not there, he's obviously quite right to sort of well, I won't say he's sitting on the fence, but but keep his options open, let's put it that way. So I welcome this report. I think it's been done really professionally, and I'm sure it's Andrew and the whole team that have been behind it, and so well done. And thanks also to the officers of East Northants as well for their efforts. And I think, quite frankly, if we all put something in along these lines, we have done our residents as well as can be expected.
Thank you. Councillor Davey, please.
Yes, I also wanted to thank the officers for what they've done. My point was more just to inform other councillors, because some of them have spoken about responses they gave. We also, as a council in Corby, gave a similar response to the response the JPU is giving, and it was done in consultation. We were similarly not too impressed with some of the proposals. So yeah, we gave a similar response.
Thank you very much. I know the Kettering one had some robust comments in it as well. That too has gone out from Simon Richardson, who's with us tonight as well. Are there any other speakers wishing to comment at this stage? If not, I'll ask Andrew just to come back and pick up on some of those points.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you to all members for your kind words. It's certainly involved the whole team, but also your officers at the individual authorities, so that we can put forward the strongest representation, which is there is consistency across the board, but I think it's good that it's not a cut and paste, that each council has got its own slight variations on the way it's expressed, but essentially the same points. I think, Chairman, that there's not a lot I need to come back on. I think some of the points about beauty being in the eye of the beholder, I think we have covered that off. Issues around, I'm dealing with Councillor Brackenbury's points here, around the democratic deficit in development management. We have covered that off. I don't think these proposals would do away entirely with planning applications as you currently know them, so there would still be a role for the councils in determining those, but it's clearly seeking to take a lot of development out of that process into a much more permissive system, where you would have to do the upfront thinking in the plan making process. The issue of permitted development rights and impacts on infrastructure, it is interesting that they're talking about extending the scope of the levy to capture some of the stuff that goes through as permitted development. So there wouldn't be permitted development wouldn't be getting away without paying for infrastructure costs, but it remains to be seen how that would be implemented. Looking down the list, I think most of the points were really just reinforcing things that we have included. Councillor Scarborough's point about not sure if we endorse, if we're actually saying yes, we think there should be a national body. We could change that to not sure, but I think that argument has already departed slightly, because I noticed that the government has appointed a chairman for its new body to do exactly this job. So I'm not sure why they were consulting on it, but that is something that is happening. So I don't think it's worth us changing that one. and I know that Councillor Jenny, I'm grateful that you've made those more detailed points through other representations, but I think we've hopefully captured the essence of what members wished us to. I think, Chairman, that's all the ones I wish to comment on, unless members feel I haven't answered any points.
Thank you very much indeed, Andrew. And I'd like to add my congratulations to the team also. They've done a splendid job. And I now propose that we move straight through to the recommendation that the head of Northamptonshire JPDU recommends that the Joint Planning Committee agrees to the response to the planning white paper provided at Appendix A. Can I have a proposer and a seconder, please?
Proposed, Chair.
Thank you, Stephen.
Yeah.
Thank you, Andy.
This is waiting as well as second chair.
Yeah. So we will now go straight through and I'll ask Anne to conduct the individual members' votes, please.
Thank you, Chair. If you could indicate for, against or not voting when I call out your name. Councillor Tebbert.
For.
Councillor Brackenbury.
For.
Councillor Waters.
I saw him now. For. He's put his hand up.
Right.
Thank you, Mark.
Councillor North.
For.
Councillor Mercer.
Or.
Councillor O'Hara.
For.
Councillor Dady.
For.
Councillor Jenny.
For.
Councillor Waters. Yeah, sorry. Got you down twice, Councillor Waters. Councillor Scarborough.
For.
Thank you, Chair. That's unanimous.
Excellent. Thank you all very much.
Chairman, can my vote be recorded for as well? Thank you.
I'm sorry, Councillor Griffiths.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you for that vote of confidence in our team at JPU. I will move on now to item 5, England's Economic Heartland Draft Transport Strategy. And Andrew will take us through this.
Chairman, I'm going to hand over to Samuel Humphreys to take you through this item.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Samuel, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Hope everyone can hear me fine. I'll just jump straight into report item 5, as you say, on England's Economic Heartland Draft Transport Strategy. Basically, we're seeking endorsement from the JPC today on our submitted response to this consultation. The previous version of this document, for a bit of context, was the outline transport strategy. And hopefully members will recall that this was reported to the JPC around about this time last year, in which we took on board comments and feedback from yourselves to feed into this previous response. Now, the draft transport strategy, which we're reporting on today, primarily looks at how our previous comments have been addressed. So that's what I'll talk through momentarily. It also picks up feedback from members who attended a briefing by Naomi Green of EEH. This was early September. So this has been considered in the response as well. The response itself is at Appendix 1 of the report and was developed with input from the councils, all four and county. At officer level, we submitted it on the consultation deadline of the 6th of October. In terms of the content of the document, the draft transport strategy is very much in a similar vein to the outline version, the previous version. So I won't go through in detail about what each proposal is and each policy is, but this is summarised at paragraphs 3.3 and 3.4 of the report. With this in mind, I'll just go straight into sort of the implications for Northamptonshire, which is section 4 of the report. So our officer analysis concludes that the draft transport strategy has responded positively to many of our previously highlighted issues that we picked up in the previous consultation. Paragraph 4.2 of the report sort of lists these in a bit more detail, where previous issues have been picked up and addressed, so to speak. Just one of particular interest that I'd like to highlight sort of regards just in general the recognition of North Northamptonshire within the document. We've got a much more prominent role within this document now, and the identification of particular interest to us is the identification of a northern east-west arc, which covers Oxfordshire, Northamptonshire to Peterborough, if you can imagine that on a map, which is illustrated within the document, which with this identified has, with this, should I say, are some proposed connectivity studies which will look at the constraints with east-west connectivity within our patch and look into opportunities to enhance the connectivity as well throughout North Northamptonshire and beyond. So we obviously welcome this, and we look forward to working with EEH on the work that will be subsequent to the transport strategy being published. There's just a handful of issues with the latest version of the document that we have picked out. Nothing sort of, well, they do have their own merit, I suppose, but I'll just to list those to you now very briefly. We've highlighted that these are in paragraphs 4.3 to 4.5, by the way, of the report. We've basically highlighted the issue of achieving net zero transport network, which they have put in as wanting to achieve by no later than 2050. I think based on previous feedback from members and in light of the climate emergency, etc., we've reiterated in our latest response whether they want to consider bringing this forward, whether there's capacity for that to be a bit more ambitious, as has been previous feedback. So that's something we've re-emphasised. Another issue that we've again sort of reiterated regards the sort of connectivity issues or potential issues on the Midland Main Line. There's going to be a timetable change, which I think we talked about before. Members will probably be aware of, with regards to particularly from Wellingborough to London, reduced services that we've basically highlighted as being a more immediate challenge compared to some of the more long-term issues that the document identifies. And linked to this, we've asked for more explicit reference within the document with regard to the disproportionately expensive rail fares that our residents experience within North Northamptonshire when wanting to travel to London compared to our neighbours in, say, Bedford or Northampton or Huntingdon, which again I think is something that has picked up on before. Finally, the final issue that we've just wanted to sort of re-emphasise or well shed light on is the issue of COVID. Obviously something that's ever changing. The document itself does pick up on the issue fairly extensively with regards to a range of issues such as digital infrastructure and the great reliance that we're going to have on that going forward, most likely. But we've also picked out that there might be a gap within the document with regard to public transport and the impact that the pandemic is currently having, as we're probably aware, on the uptake of public transport, and particularly in the short term. And we'd like to see basically the identification of this and some mitigation measures potentially set out about how this could be addressed. So that's to summarise. Basically, I'll just conclude on those points. Just to say that we welcome the strategy's stance on connectivity and transport infrastructure, and it's encouraging to see that there's been a positive response to our previous comments, and importantly the enhanced recognition of North Northamptonshire in general, with the identification of the northern east-west corridor, etc. We welcome the opportunity to obviously work with the EEH going forward with any sort of new proposals and work streams in relation to this strategy, and alongside the relevant partners as well that you'll be aware of. So that's all I'll say on it for now. Obviously, happy to take any questions, but I'll hand back to the chair for the recommendation, etc.
Thank you very much, Samuel. Does anyone wish to comment on this one?
Councillor Griffiths, Chair.
Councillor Griffiths.
Thank you, Chairman. And yeah, another great piece of work. And I don't normally pick individual officers out, but Rob Harbour's work that he's done both with regard to the ARC and, as we say, enhancing our presence both with the ARC and SEMLEP is worthy of mention. I'm sure you agree, Chairman. There is a big ARC event happening on the 17th of November, a virtual one, and I think we should all do our best to take part in that. And Northamptonshire needs to be a leading light in the ARC, and I think that's what our ambition should be. And I know that I've spoken to Stephen and other members about that ambition. It's not relating directly to this paper, but the work that was done on the recovery through enterprise document that's been put together and co-signed by myself, Stephen, and also Matt Golby from NCC, makes a big mention of the ARC in there. And this is so important as we come through COVID, isn't it? All of this is really important. So I just wanted to mention that at the same time. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you, Martin.
Councillor Brackenbridge.
Councillor Brackenbury. David, all yours.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry, I was busily muting myself, having already unmuted. No, again, I'd like to thank the officers for such an excellent and thoughtful response to this paper, and just touch on a few small areas which are in fact already fed back. So, you know, I represent a very rural part of East Northamptonshire, and it is important in the rush to zero carbon to understand the different requirements that residents in rural and suburban and urban areas face. It is going to be very difficult in the short medium term to reduce reliance on the private car. I nearly said motor car, but the private car in a rural area, because there simply are not the alternatives, and it cannot really be envisaged there ever will be the public transport that can provide full coverage to every rural area in Northamptonshire. So it just needs to be taken into consideration. Moving on, with your permission, Chairman, I do welcome the potential for the new railway lines, or at least the enhanced railway lines from Nuneaton to Felixstowe. That's an obvious no-brainer if it can be brought forward. It would take a lot of freight off the roads, and obviously would have beneficial effects on the environment as well. And the opening of the line between Corby and Peterborough is also of considerable interest. Then we move to the last one, which is where Councillor Mercer and I, as sort of as the sort of official train spotters to the Joint Planning Committee, have looked at this from time to time, is the Midland Main Line. The comment about ticket prices is extremely welcome. I've been talking about this at this committee and elsewhere for some time, where you have considerably cheaper tickets from Huntingdon, from Northampton, and from Bedford, because they were in the former Network South East area and were considered as commuter stations, whereas Wellingborough and Kettering, and indeed Corby, were considered to be outside that boundary and were therefore intercity stations, and you pay accordingly. Now, Network South East was done away with probably 20 odd years ago, but the legacy of that ticketing still remains. So I'm very pleased to see that that has been highlighted. And lastly, yes, of course, COVID's an enormous thing at the moment. It will change fundamentally and forever work practices, I think, going forward. Not completely, but there will be fewer commuters to sit in offices 9 to 5 days a week. And that is something which will, of course, impact what we're doing going forward. So apologies, Chairman, for having spoken for so long, but a very good document. And once again, congratulations to the officers. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed.
Councillor Dady, Chair.
Councillor Davey.
Yes, thank you. I know I've spoken on this before. I just wanted it to be emphasised the point about bringing forward the date from 2050 and how important it is that we emphasise that point. I know there's questions with it and there'll be difficulties, particularly if we try and go for a 2030 date, like in Corby and Kettering we are planning to. There'll be considerable difficulties to overcome in achieving that. But I don't think it's a thing that we can just put off till decades in the future, and the resultant damage that would come from doing that. So I'm glad to see that being mentioned in this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davey.
Councillor North, Chair.
Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. Just following on all the other speakers, and not unsurprising, following on Councillor Brackenbury, obviously being on the same council, similar comments in relation to that. Again, excellent report and response, as Councillor Griffiths said, Chair. What I would say, though, is that obviously in relation to the timing of this, in relation to the white paper consultation, doesn't exactly square up. I would say they don't link up at all, which is a bit concerning. And I think that, the usual kind of, issues we have, Chair, and, not to prolong a debate, especially with Councillor Davey going, but, it's absolutely right in relation to trying to protect the, the environment, in relation to decarbonising. Obviously, the digitalisation of business and work is obviously all in the system at the moment because of obviously COVID and everybody working from home more. But we've got the usual, in my view, the usual issue here in relation to, certainly in the East, as you know, Chair, and Andrew knows that, we're not overly keen on just relying on logistics in relation to business. We're certainly looking to see, other areas of growth. And I appreciate what you just said about the digital improvements and being able to work from home. I think it's just, it doesn't reflect enough, not in the responses, Chair, but EH doesn't reflect enough in relation to the ARC, and I think how we would certainly look to grow, in the East, not speaking on behalf of Northants, but certainly the East in relation to great opportunities in relation to work and how that impacts on travel. Because as much as it talks about removing an alliance from travelling, using the private car, as Councillor Brackenbury just said, there is a reality check here that public transport has never been invested in and never put in place. And I still, although I do welcome the report, Chair, I still think there are lots of concerns going forward for Northamptonshire in relation to transport. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Stephen.
Councillor Scarborough, Chair.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I hate to add to the dose of cold water that Stephen has just poured onto this about there being a lot still to be worried about. I think it's good that the points we made previously have largely, they're not entirely been taken on board, and the document has changed very much in our favour. That's great. But when we do strategic planning, a lot of ideas float around and get recirculated time after time. For example, improved freight by rail from the Midlands to the Haven ports has been a long felt want of strategic planners for as long as I can remember, probably as long as I've been on the council or even longer. It probably became seen as a good idea pretty well 5 minutes after Dr. Beeching had pulled up the railways that made it possible. So my worry about this is that it doesn't deliver anything for us. It doesn't even really put those things much higher up the government agenda. It's particularly more, I mean, I love the idea of freight down to the Haven ports. I think it's great. But for example, the Midland Main Line is simply not sorted out. The potential damage to the southern part of Northamptonshire is still huge in that area, and that worries me. And of course, this doesn't build a mile of road, despite the fact that we all know that however hard we're trying to get people out of their private cars, we need a better road infrastructure. I'm also a bit worried about the timing, because there's some good stuff in here, and I tend to fear the Greeks when they come bearing gifts. what we don't want to see is some token gestures on infrastructure on the basis that we'll take someone else's housing numbers. And that the timing is perhaps unfortunate in that respect. However, I do believe that our representations have borne a lot of fruit, and that's a good thing. But I still, like Stephen, I have my doubts about this.
Thank you, Andrew.
Councillor Mercer, Chair.
Thank you,
Andy,
Chair. 3 points I'd like to make. The first one is that working from home and digital working practices are only going to grow, and we should be encouraging that by putting more and more emphasis and more investment into faster and faster switching gear on the internet, and making sure that every location has got high-speed access. First point. The second is that COVID-19 and SARS-CoV-2 were just the first in a conveyor belt of respiratory airborne viruses that are going to head our way over the next 30 to 50 years. And like it or not, anywhere where you share the air with other people is likely to have a repetition of this about every 10 years or so. That being the case, the idea of people sharing a close, confined space and sharing the air is always going to be dangerous when they're people you're not used to, people you don't share a bubble with. The problem is that public transport is precisely built on that principle. So it's going to be extremely difficult to persuade people out of their private cars and into buses and trains simply because they are going to grow up in an environment where it's a dangerous thing to do. You might be able to persuade people for a short while, then every so often there'll be another pandemic. We've had about 3 since 2000. The other 2 weren't so bad as this one. And people once again will flee back to their cars. So perhaps we ought to be looking at ways of making cars more efficient. One way to do that is to put some government money into car convoys. The idea that each car has an autopilot that connects it to the car in front in a queue, and the 2 drive together, sharing slipstream and reducing costs. That would be one approach to it, because that way you don't have to share the same air. Bottom line is that people, once again, aren't thinking truly strategically. They're just extrapolating from the current situation. Oh, one last point. It would be very, very good for the environment if we were to arrange for more trains to take more traffic, heavy duty traffic, off the roads. Freight can be crammed as tight as you like without risk of viruses transmitting, but we don't have the right routes to the places we want to go. Well, rather than trying to go for a big bang approach and saying we're going to build a railway from the East Coast to Birmingham, which would be a much better use of the money than building HS2, I might add, it might be quite sensible to try and do part of it. Say, persuade the government to build a high-speed railway line from the East Coast ports, where there's all the container traffic going through, to some centre point in the East Midlands, a hub if you like, and have a transfer point there from the road to the trains. At the least that way you get some of the job done. Then you can perhaps do the rest of it in a future stage. As I said, there's just extrapolation of current trends rather than proper, deep strategic thinking.
thank you very much, Andy.
Councillor Jenny, Chair.
Councillor Jenny.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to pick up on 2 points, and I think I'm going to be some more positive than the previous speaker. I just want to follow through from Councillor Dady, and I think the approach that we're taking to the green issues in this, I'd wish to commend. I know the government have got targets for 2050, and I know the green community believe that we should be delivering it much faster. But I would not advocate committing ourselves to that faster process in terms of policy decisions. I would commit ourselves to making the greater effort to actually achieving that target by 2030, but not put it into policy, because as we've seen, things like COVID do sort of change people's attitudes to things. And I would hate to see us caught not actually achieving anything by 2030 because of other outside influences. I think we should be doing our best to get there, but I don't think we should actually be committing to it. And the second thing, which is certainly much more positive, if we'd had this discussion 9 months ago, I would have been very, very hard on discussion of the ARC. I was describing it in those days as the Bedford to Cambridge corridor because there's nothing whatsoever for Northamptonshire coming out. Now that they have moved and they're looking at the Northern Arc, I'm much more hopeful, and I think we should continue to press to be in there to influence that as much as possible. And I'm certainly happy to work with all of my colleagues from North Northants that appear at those sort of meetings to make sure that that happens. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed.
Nobody else, Chair?
That's excellent. I've just noticed in the recommendation that refers to Appendix 1. And Appendix 1, I've written on the top of my 6th of October document, because I believe that to be what the Appendix 1 document actually is.
Yeah.
If everyone else is content that that is the case, I'll move straight through to the recommendation then, that the head of North Northamptonshire JPDU recommends that the Joint Planning Committee endorses the submitted response in Appendix 1. I so move.
Happy to move that, Chairman.
Proposer and a second.
Happy to propose that.
Thank you, David.
Yeah.
Jenny and Brackenbury.
Sorry, I missed the second.
Councillor Brackenbury, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. We'll go to the vote then, please.
Thank you, Chair. As before, I'll read out each councillor's name, and if you can indicate for, against or not voting. Councillor Tebbert.
For.
Councillor Brackenbury.
For.
Councillor Ward.
For.
North.
For.
Councillor Mercer.
For.
Councillor O'Hara.
For.
Councillor Dady.
For.
Councillor Scarborough.
For.
Councillor Griffiths.
For.
Thank you, Chair. That's unanimous.
Thank you very much indeed. That concludes the items on the agenda. I have no urgent items other than to thank the officers again for doing a superb job. And Anthony, you can leave with 2 minutes in time. Thank you all very much.